To everyone. Today we welcome a panel of three nominees, Mr. Nicholas Ganji, Mr. Aaron Peterson, and Mr. David Folks. I want to thank each of you for your willingness to serve, and I welcome your families who are here in support. We are participating in a process with a storied history. Under the Senate's earliest rules, the Judiciary Committee stood as one of the three original committees of the United States Senate. For more than 150 years, this committee has held nomination hearings, upholding a tradition that reaches far beyond any single nominee. These proceedings represent the solemn duty entrusted to this committee to safeguard the integrity of the federal judiciary, an institution that remains the backbone of our constitutional republic. For more than 2 centuries, our courts have served as a stabilizing force in American life. They have defended liberty in times of crisis, checked overreach in moments of political passion, and upheld the rule of law when it was least popular to do so. And today, under President Trump, we're witnessing a welcomed return to that tradition, a return to judges who read the law, who respect the separation of powers, and who understand that the judiciary is not a political weapon, but rather a constitutional trust. We need to renew our constitutional heritage. Even now, some courts continue to stretch beyond their constitutional role, issuing sweeping injunctions, expanding statutes past their text, and inserting ideology into matters reserved for the elected branches. Through the nomination of rule of law judges, we are restoring courts to their rightful place, interpreting the law as written, not as wished. And that return to constitutional values shows the character and caliber of the nominees coming before this committee. We see men and women who have dedicated their lives to the rule of law, who have prosecuted criminals, defended communities, and shown through years of public service that fidelity to the Constitution is not an abstract promise, but rather a lived commitment. Which brings me to introduce the first nominee on today's panel, Nicholas Ganji. Nick is exactly the kind of nominee who reflects the best of this moment. Nick has spent nearly 20 years on the front lines of federal law enforcement. He has prosecuted cartel traffickers, violent offenders, predators of children, human smugglers, and corrupt actors who have threatened our communities. He has tried cases, overseen offices, managed teams, and now as the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of Texas, he leads one of the busiest, most consequential U.S. Attorney offices in the nation. His record is enormous in scope and unmistakable in character. Under his leadership, federal prosecutors in Houston and across South Texas have dismantled transnational criminal organizations, stopped human trafficking pipelines, taken down large-scale drug rings, and protected children from predation. He has enforced immigration law faithfully in a district where more than 70% of federal sentencing matters involve immigration offenses. He has done the work quietly, diligently, professionally that keeps Americans safe. He has also served this body dutifully and patriotically. Indeed, Nick's one failing is his choice of for whom to work. And for 3 years, Nick was my chief counsel on the Senate Judiciary Committee. I hope this committee will forgive him that momentary lapse in judgment. But I can tell you, in that role, I saw firsthand the qualities that define him: exceptional judgment, deep integrity, respect for the Constitution, and humility in the exercise of public power. He was a leader on criminal justice issues, on border security, on judicial nominations, and on some of the most complex matters that come before this committee. I trusted his counsel then, and I trust his character now. President Trump nominated Nick because he embodies the trait we should demand from every federal judge: seriousness, independence, commitment to the rule of law, and a lifetime of service and dedication to the American people. I have every confidence that he will serve the Southern District with honor, and I wholeheartedly support his nomination. And with that, I recognize Ranking Member Durbin for his opening remarks.
Thank you very much, Senator Cruz, and congratulations to the nominees, their families, and friends who've gathered here today. We have 3 district court nominees before the committee. I want to apologize in advance that I have a meeting with the leadership at 10:30, so I have to step out. I hope I can return and personally ask my questions at that time. I want to raise an issue that doesn't relate exclusively to these nominees, but basically all the members of the judiciary. The job of a district court judge is not an easy task. The dockets are busy. The questions of law are complicated. But more recently, and especially this year, the work has become even more difficult as jurists across the country face increasing personal attacks and even threats of violence. The uptick in threats is not random. The attacks against individual judges by this administration and their passionate followers have been recorded. In March, the president demanded the impeachment of a federal judge simply for ruling against the administration. The president called the judge, quote, a radical left lunatic, a troublemaker and agitator. The president added, quote, this judge, like many of the crooked judges I am forced to appear before, should be impeached, end of quote. The president is not the only member of this administration to use this kind of inflammatory language. Earlier this month, Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche, a former personal lawyer of the president, told the Federalist Society the administration is engaged in, quote, a war against, quote, rogue activist judges. When the Deputy Attorney General refers to litigation involving the government as a war, you can understand how the president's supporters might consider threats and violence as a natural next step. Just last month, the White House Deputy Chief of Staff, Stephen Miller, referred to a district judge court's order blocking the Trump administration's deployment of the National Guard as, quote, legal insurrection. Mr. Miller claimed that the so-called left-wing terrorism is, quote, shielded by far-left Democratic judges, prosecutors, and attorneys general. The president who was nominated, his record should be explained. Taking this criticism from the White House is hard to imagine, but this was a judge that was actually chosen by President Trump in his first term. MAGA loyalists in Congress have eagerly piled on. So far this year, Republican congressmen have filed impeachment resolutions against at least 8 district court judges for high crimes and misdemeanors, and the crime they're accused of, disagreeing with the president. In response to this unprecedented attack on the judiciary, Chief Justice John Roberts issued a rare statement, and I quote, for more than 2 centuries, it has been established that impeachment is not an appropriate response to disagreement concerning judicial decisions. The normal appellate review process was made for that purpose. As a result of the surge in threats, many judges now require additional security, including my judges in my home state of Illinois. The administration's unlawful immigration raids in Chicago have led to numerous lawsuits, controversial decisions. This litigation, in turn, has led to a rise in threats against several judges who actually handle these cases. As I've said many times before and will repeat each time given an opportunity, violence or threats of violence, whether from the right or the left of the political spectrum, are never, ever acceptable. I'd like to quote from a recent statement by the Chicago chapter of the Federal Bar Association, a nonpartisan organization. The statement reads, quote, expressions of public sentiment, whether criticism or praise, are not threats to judicial independence. Recent threats of violence directed at Chicago federal judges for simply doing their job, however, are unacceptable and have no place in our discourse. I couldn't agree more. More than 6 months ago, I asked the Justice Department for a briefing on the Marshal Service efforts to protect our judges. I'm still waiting for that to take place. It should be a priority of this committee. The threats and challenges our federal judges face grow worse every day. Let's do something about it on the Judiciary Committee. I yield, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Now, in this order, because Senator Sullivan and Senator Cornyn have other engagements, I'm going to call on Senator Sullivan first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Senator Durbin and my Senate colleagues on the Judiciary Committee. It is an honor to be here today to introduce a distinguished Alaskan before this committee, Aaron Peterson, who has been nominated by President Trump to serve as a judge on the United States District Court for the District of Alaska. As you all know, the vetting process for a federal judge is rigorous and time-consuming, as it should be, and I want to thank Aaron and his family for their patience as this process has moved forward. As part of this nominating process, Aaron was interviewed by the Alaska Federal Judiciary Council, a bipartisan group of Alaskans who volunteered their time to interview federal judge candidates. The recent controversy about a federal judge in Alaska, who was not my first choice and ended up being a real disgrace to Alaska and the federal judiciary, made it clear to me that we needed a much better vetting system in Alaska for federal judges. So I established the Alaska Federal Judiciary Council. Aaron is the first nominee who was interviewed by that council, and I convened this, as I mentioned, for better vetting, and I actually took some advice from our senators from Texas and Senator Durbin, who have similar committees to nominate quality candidates. I know that this Alaska Federal Judiciary Council process will improve the selection of Alaska judicial candidates, and I want to publicly thank all the members of the council who put time and effort into this over the last year. When I first met Aaron, I was impressed by his integrity, his respect for the rule of law, and his deep commitment to public service, which also includes military service. Alaska has more veterans per capita than any other state in the country, and Aaron is one of those proud Alaska veterans. He served in security forces in the U.S. Air Force after 9/11, deploying in the Middle East and around the globe to protect airfields and airmen. His legal experience is broad and deep and Alaska-focused. After receiving his Juris Doctorate from Gonzaga University School of Law, he came back home to serve as a law clerk for Alaska Superior Court Judge Michael Spann. He went on to serve as an assistant district attorney for the Anchorage District Attorney's Office, where he prosecuted serious criminal cases, including homicides and sex crimes. Alaska is a great state, and my colleagues have heard me brag about it many, many times. But one thing we are not proud of in our state is our very high rates of sexual assault and domestic violence. It is a scourge on our state. Aaron's experience in prosecuting these cases and working closely with victims will be a huge asset to the federal court in Alaska. Alaska is a unique state with many federal laws that specifically focus on our uniqueness. The Trans-Alaska Pipeline Authorization Act, the Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act, the Alaska National Interest Lands Conservation Act. These are massive, complex laws exclusively focused on Alaska. Even more recent laws like the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, the 2020 CARES Act, and the recent Budget Reconciliation Bill signed into law by President Trump in July have entire sections in the federal law focused on Alaska. All of these laws have significant and important promises and commitments made by the Congress to Alaskans and our Alaska Native people. But what has been a pattern for decades is that federal agencies charged with carrying out these laws often ignore these commitments to Alaskans. Supreme Court Justice Elena Kagan said it recently and best in the two recent cases before the Supreme Court called Sturgeon 1 and Sturgeon 2. Both were decided 9-0 by the U.S. Supreme Court in Alaska's favor in analyzing ANILCA and ANCSA, the statutes I just cited above. Justice Kagan concluded, ANILCA and other federal laws reflect the simple truth that Alaska is often the exception, not the rule, and is very different from the rest of the country in terms of laws. For a federal judge in Alaska, it is imperative that he or she have a deep understanding of these federal laws and their application. Aaron definitely does. He has been an assistant attorney general in both the civil and criminal divisions in the Department of Law for over 10 years. He is currently the senior assistant attorney general in the natural resources section of the Alaska Department of Law. He is the primary litigation counsel on anything to do from fisheries, water rights, and access to federal lands. Aaron is a lifelong Alaskan. He knows and understands our great state and the federal laws that reflect on Alaska. I think he will be a great federal judge. I urge his nomination be sent to the Senate floor with positive votes from all the members of this committee. Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. It's an honor to introduce Aaron.
Thank you, Senator Sullivan. Now, Senator Cornyn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's hard to improve on Senator Cruz's introduction of Nick Ganji, but I'm going to say a few nice words about him. First of all, congratulations, Nick, to you and your family. I know they're very proud of this great day. I'm always happy to see more Texans represented on the federal bench. And as Senator Cruz pointed out, Mr. Ganji is a highly accomplished lawyer, having served as a federal prosecutor in multiple districts, including as interim U.S. attorney in the Southern District of Texas, the district into which now he will be a Article III judge after his confirmation. During his time as a prosecutor, he worked on important topics like stemming the tide of illegal immigration, combating human trafficking and drug trafficking, and protecting children from malicious offenders. His impressive legal credentials, paired with his extensive experience as a prosecutor and his long-standing dedication to advancing the rule of law in Texas and around the country, make him an excellent addition to the federal bench. So again, Nick, congratulations on your nomination. I look forward to supporting your confirmation, both here and on the floor of the U.S. Senate. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Cornyn.
Thank you, Chairman Grassley and Senator Durbin, for holding this very important hearing today. And good morning to my distinguished colleagues that serve on this committee, this difficult committee. It's an honor to be here with my friend and colleague from the state of Arkansas, Senator Tom Cotton, to introduce President Trump's nominee to serve as judge on the United States District Court for the Western District of Arkansas. I would also like to say hello to his family and friends who are in attendance to support him, and we're very happy to have them. A native of Harrison, Arkansas, Clay is a graduate of Arkansas State University and the University of Arkansas Law School. After graduating, Clay served as a deputy prosecuting attorney for Benton County, where his work ethic and leadership elevated him to division chief. He then transitioned to the U.S. Attorney's Office of the Western District of Arkansas and has almost 2 decades there marked by extensive and impressive accomplishments. His experience at the U.S. Attorney's Office includes stints as an assistant United States attorney, rising to deputy criminal chief, and then criminal chief, then his first assistant United States attorney, and eventually serving as the United States attorney since January of 2020. Throughout his career, Clay has earned the respect of his colleagues, law enforcement partners, and the communities he has served for his integrity, his professionalism, and leadership. He has built a reputation as a principled prosecutor who approaches every case with steady judgment, fairness, and unwavering commitment to the rule of law. I know he will approach each case put before him with the same dedication and intellect that he has demonstrated throughout his career. His expertise and temperament will undoubtedly serve him well as a judge, which is why Senator Cotton and I applaud President Trump for selecting him to fill this post. It's clear he is not only qualified, but extremely well suited for the role. I strongly support his nomination and urge my colleagues to do the same. Thank you, Senator Grassley.
Thank you, Chairman Grassley, Senator Durbin, and members of the Judiciary Committee. Good morning. I'm pleased to join Senator Bozeman today to introduce a civil servant and a fellow Arkansan, Mr. David Clay Folks. I'd first like to thank Clay for his many years of public service and for agreeing to continue this service as the President's nominee to be a United States District Judge for the Western District of Arkansas. I'd also like to thank his family who are joining him here today and thank them for their support and encouragement throughout this process. As an accomplished prosecutor with experience handling cases ranging from misdemeanors to murders, Clay has a lengthy track record that underscores his respect for the rule of law. Upon graduating from the University of Arkansas School of Law and after serving in the Benton County Prosecuting Attorney's Office, he began working at the United States Attorney's Office in the Western District. Clay has spent nearly 2 decades in this U.S. Attorney's Office, serving as the Assistant U.S. Attorney, the Criminal Chief, and now as the U.S. Attorney for the Western District. Under his leadership, the office has prioritized safety and law enforcement. Specifically, Clay has started a response team alongside federal and state agents to curb fentanyl distribution, investigate every drug poisoning death, and hold drug dealers accountable. In addition to his efforts to crack down on illicit drug trafficking, Clay has also placed special emphasis on keeping kids safe and allowing them to live their childhoods to the fullest. Thanks to his leadership and efforts, his office has prosecuted more than 3 times the national average of child abuse and exploitation cases. Clay has also been recognized with numerous awards for his accomplishments throughout his career. These include the Hope Coalition Excellence in Law Enforcement Award and a recognition from the DEA for outstanding efforts in drug trafficking prosecutions. Again, I'd like to thank him for his many years of working to get criminals off the streets and to keep Arkansas communities safe. I strongly support his nomination to be the next United States District Judge for the Western District of Arkansas, and I encourage my colleagues to do the same. Thank you.
Please come to the table, and before you sit down, I would like to have you repeat the oath. Okay, are you ready? Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give before the committee will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help you God.
I do.
Each of you have answered in the affirmative. Thank you. Now we'll start with Mr. Folks. This is your, please sit down. This is your opportunity to speak to anything you want to say to the committee, but also your opportunity to introduce family and friends, whatever the case might be in your respective roles. So proceed, Mr. Folks.
Thank you, Chairman Grassley. As you've heard, my name is Clay Folks. I'm currently serving as the United States Attorney in the Western District of Arkansas. I want to begin by thanking the committee for your time and attention to this matter today. Thank you especially to Senator Grassley and Ranking Member Durbin, but thank you to every member of the committee for your attention today and for the opportunity to speak to you here today. I want to also thank President Trump for this nomination. This is not only the honor of my lifetime to be nominated for this and the highest honor of my career, but it also exceeds my wildest expectations for my career and for my life. And I'm deeply grateful and thankful to President Trump for his support and for his nomination. I want to also thank Senator Boozman and Senator Cotton for their kind words of introduction and for their support for this nomination and throughout this process. I also want to thank them and give them my deepest gratitude for their commitment to making Arkansas a better place for our citizens. Before I begin with introducing my family, I also want to take a moment and thank God for this opportunity as well. There is no question in my mind that I would not be here today speaking with this distinguished committee if it weren't for his strong hand of intervention on my behalf. As it says in John 3:27, man can receive not even one thing unless it is given to him from heaven, and I'm so grateful for his blessings. I'm also so thankful that my family is able to join me here today. I'm joined by my wonderful, beautiful wife of 23 years, Brianne Folks. Not only has she done an amazing job raising our family, but she also is a very skilled and talented registered nurse and works at a hospital in Northwest Arkansas. Her skills as a nurse are only surpassed by her skills as a mom, and God has blessed us with 3 amazing children who I'm also proud to say are joining us here today. My son Whit is 17, and our twins Adeline and Asher are both 12. They all 3 exceed at academics and sports and playing in the band back home in Western Arkansas. I'm also joined by my parents today, David and Karen Sue Folks, both of Jonesboro, Arkansas. I'm so grateful that they're here today to support me, but I'm also grateful for the many sacrifices that they made for my sister and I in raising us. They were careful to raise us according to God's word and his will, but they also instilled in both my sister and I a strong work ethic from a very young age, and I'm so thankful for both of them. My dad retired after 40 years of service with the United States Army and the United States Department of Agriculture. Senator Grassley, he'd be happy to talk to you about soybeans and corn anytime. And so I'm so grateful that they're here today and in support of this. I'm also very blessed to have the most amazing in-laws who are also here to support me today. Danny and Linda Pridmore from Jonesboro, Arkansas. I'm so grateful for their unending support of our family and so thankful that they're here today. I see that Senator Kennedy has stepped out, but they both read Senator Kennedy's book and are enormous admirers of his despite the Arkansas-Louisiana rivalry. I'm also joined by several friends here in the audience today and other family members, and I'm so grateful for all of them for their support. I'm also incredibly grateful for the many friends and family members back home in Western Arkansas who are praying for me this morning and have expressed their support for me. I want to end by just saying that I'm incredibly grateful for the men and women of the United States Attorney's Office in Western Arkansas. It is my honor and privilege to serve alongside them. I try to begin every day with the goal of thinking about what can I do today to make Arkansas a better and a safer place for our citizens. And I know that every member of the U.S. Attorney's Office in Western Arkansas shares that goal and shares the commitment that they've expressed over and over again to making Arkansas a better and a safer place. I'm so grateful to them for their support and to be able to serve alongside them. Thank you, Senator Grassley.
Thank you, Mr. Folks. Now, Mr. Ganji.
Thank you, Chairman Grassley and Ranking Member Durbin for scheduling this hearing this morning. Of course, I would like to thank President Trump for the great honor of this nomination, but I'd also like to thank Senator Cruz and Cornyn for their very generous introductions and thank them both for their recommendation of me to the White House as well as their support throughout the confirmation process. 64 years ago, my father came to this country with nothing but his life savings of $100 and a deep, abiding faith in the American dream. He started off working as a busboy and later hand-drying cars at a car wash. He eventually moved west where he met my mother, herself the child of immigrants, growing up without hot water or indoor plumbing in a dusty Wyoming mining town. They are both here this morning. Today, just one generation later, their son sits before the world's greatest deliberative body, being considered for a lifetime appointment to the federal bench. In very few countries would something like this be possible, and nowhere else but America would something like this be a common occurrence. This country has given me and my family a gift of incalculable value, and I have sought to repay this debt to the extent it can be repaid through a lifetime of public service, the next chapter of which will hopefully be as a United States District Court judge. Thank you for your time. I greatly appreciate the opportunity to speak to you this morning, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you. Now, Mr. Peterson.
Chairman Grassley, Ranking Member Durbin, members of the committee, thank you for scheduling this hearing. I am thrilled to be here. I want to thank President Trump for giving me the honor of this nomination. It truly is the professional honor of a lifetime. And I want to thank Senator Sullivan both for his support throughout this process and for that very kind introduction. I'd also like to thank Senator Murkowski for her support during this process. I want to recognize some of the people who've traveled here to support me. First and foremost, my brilliant and beautiful wife, Kadra. We've been married over 21 years, and she's been with me every step of the way. I definitely would not be anywhere near this opportunity without her unwavering love, patience, and support. She's supported me throughout my career while pursuing her own very demanding careers as a math teacher and as a mother to our 3 children, our 12-year-old daughter and our 9-year-old twins. I want to thank her for all the sacrifices that she has made to make this a possibility. And I also want to thank Kadra's sister, Reagan, for watching our kids while we're here. Good luck, Reagan. My father also traveled here from Alaska, and he wouldn't have missed this. He's been at every important life event for all of his children and his grandchildren. My father moved to Alaska from Southern California in 1975. He planned to stay for a few months and have an adventure, and he's been there for 50 years. And fortunately, my mother agreed to go to Alaska with him, also from Southern California. And I thank God every day that they chose to live there and that I got to be born and raised in the last frontier. Unfortunately, my mother couldn't travel here today, but I know she's extremely proud watching back home in Eagle River. My sister Lindsay also came here and is at the hearing, and my uncle, U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel retired, Larry Peterson, is also here. On a professional level, I want to thank Judge Michael Spann, for whom I had the privilege of clerking. Judge Spann was truly an honor, and it was a pleasure to work for him. When I told him I was thinking about this opportunity, he had been the U.S. Attorney for many years in Alaska, and he encouraged me, and I want to thank him for that encouragement. Judge Spann approached his work diligently, with humility, and always respecting every litigant that appeared before him. I took so much away from that clerkship, and I've carried those lessons with me every day since. And finally, I want to thank Attorney General Steve Cox and all of the fantastic people that I've had the pleasure to work with over the years at the Alaska Department of Law. It has been an honor and a pleasure to serve my home state alongside all of those extremely dedicated public servants. I welcome the committee's questions.
Thank you. Now we'll have questions, and I'll start out. I'm going to start with you, Mr. Ganji. The committee has received multiple letters from criminal defense and civil rights attorneys who's litigated against you. Each of them praised your professionalism and the fidelity to the law. Several members of this committee and their staffs have also worked with you during your time on Senator Cruz's chief counsel. Both as a prosecutor and as a Senate staffer, you've had to work with people who disagreed with you to serve the American people. So this may seem like a softball question, but your answer will kind of tell us how you will approach it as a person with a robe. What lessons will you take from these experiences to the bench?
Senator, I think the single most important thing in the way that the court treats any litigant is to treat them with respect. Not only treat them with personal respect, but let them understand that you're taking their case seriously. I think it's tempting to treat a case maybe as a routine matter. You see, hundreds of these, this specific type of case a year, but to the litigants in front of you, it's the single most important case of their life. And so if fortunate enough to be confirmed as a district judge, I would approach each legal dispute with care, with attention, and I want everyone to walk out of that courtroom. They may not win, but they would feel that they have been given their day in court.
Thank you. Now to Mr. Folks. You've had a long career as a local and federal prosecutor, even including being a U.S. attorney. You've received many awards for your service, and you've tried over 20 cases to verdict, I've been told. Can you explain your judicial philosophy and how your experience as a prosecutor has prepared you to serve as a judge?
Thank you, Senator. My experience as a prosecutor has meant everything in preparation for this moment. I have learned deep and lasting lessons from every single judge that I was able to practice in front of, from meticulous preparation to understanding the case and the law to treating parties with respect at every opportunity. And I have learned something from every single judge that I've tried cases in front of or practiced in front of that I would intend to take with me and further my career if I'm fortunate enough to be confirmed by the Senate. As far as my judicial philosophy, I agree with what my colleague, Mr. Ganji, said. It is so important for a judge to be the most prepared individual in the courtroom, and it's so important for a judge to correctly identify the applicable law and to correctly find the proper facts and the true facts, apply the law to those facts, and make a decision that is independent and that is fair and just, and that demonstrates deep respect for the law. And I think that would be the judicial philosophy that I've learned throughout my career as a prosecutor that I would take with me to the bench.
Thank you.
Thank
now
you,
to
Senator.
Mr. Peterson. You've spent nearly 15 years in public service at the Alaska Department of Law. You now serve as Assistant Attorney General in the Natural Resource Section. please tell us how your career has prepared you for the unique type of cases that you would preside over as a federal judge in Alaska.
Well, Chairman Grassley, as Senator Sullivan mentioned, Alaska has many federal statutes that are specific to Alaska. They're large, important pieces of legislation that are critical to the success of Alaska. And one of those that he mentioned was the Alaska National Interest Lands Conservation Act. I've litigated that act specifically for several years. I have a deep familiarity with the laws that are specific to Alaska and that are unique and come before district judges in Alaska, and where really nobody else in the country would have any reason to know much about them. So the deep familiarity that I have with those laws, with my history of litigating them, I think prepared me for many of the cases that will come before the district court. And also my career as a prosecutor. I traveled all across Alaska prosecuting cases, serious felonies in Anchorage, and cases all across the state, from Juneau to Dutch Harbor to Kenai to Delta Junction, even appearing in Uktiavik on the Arctic Ocean for a sentencing hearing. So I have a wide cross-section of experience in the arenas that are likely to come before the district court, and hopefully I'll be able to preside over those matters if I'm fortunate enough to be confirmed.
Thank you all very much. Now, Ms. Senator Hirano.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome to each of you and to your families. Good morning. I ask the following two initial questions of all nominees who come before any of the committees on which I sit, relevant to the fitness to serve. So I'll ask these questions, and I'd like to ask all of you to respond individually, starting with Mr. Folks, and then we'll just go right down the line. Since you became a legal adult, have you ever made unwanted requests for sexual favors or committed any verbal or physical harassment or assault of a sexual nature?
No, Senator.
No, Senator.
No, Senator.
Have you ever faced discipline or entered into a settlement relating to this kind of conduct?
No, Senator.
No, Senator.
No, Senator.
For Mr. Ganji, you recently reposted on your official U.S. Attorney X account a Homeland Security post that compared capturing undocumented immigrants to a Pokemon game using the game's catchphrase, quote, "Gotta catch 'em all." And you reposted this video of ICE officers catching immigrants set to the Pokemon theme song, and you commented, and I'm quoting, "Give their," meaning the Homeland Security, social media guy a raise. It's troubling enough, problematic enough, that all of us are seeing videos of ICE agents masked, no identifying marks or anything, engaging in raids in communities, sowing fear and chaos. And to those individuals who are the subject of these raids, do you think that being portrayed as a game, do you think that's appropriate? Do you think that it's appropriate to repost this kind of a video, knowing that you are going to be sitting as a judge, possibly having some of these people come before you? Do you find it amusing?
Senator, my understanding of that video is that specifically is about ICE's Worst of the Worst initiative. They specifically cite, I think, 8 or 9 individuals in that, one convicted of murder, one convicted of manslaughter, one convicted of unspecified homicide, several child sex.
Actually, I'm asking, we know that the ICE agents are not just going after the worst of the worst. That is what they're supposed to be doing, but we know that there are U.S. citizens who are also being caught up. We know that there is fear in many communities because of these raids, and I'm asking you whether you consider this a source of amusement to the point where you would repost this kind of a video. You can just answer yes or no.
Well, Senator, again, the video, as I understand it, was specifically talking about the Worst of the Worst initiative. And so, having murderers and those that
Okay.
sexually prey on children off the street is a good thing.
This
and-
is not, excuse me, this is not an opportunity for you to basically toe the regime's line. Let me go on, because obviously I do not consider it appropriate what the ICE agents are doing, sowing fear and chaos through our communities, to the point where communities are rising up and protesting and doing everything they can to protect members in their community. Do you, Mr. Ganji, agree that the Constitution provides due process rights to all persons, regardless of citizenship status?
Senator, due process applies to everyone.
And as a judge, you would apply due process to everyone, regardless of whether they're U.S. citizens or not.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay,
I'm sorry, yes, Senator.
thank you. Throughout your career as a prosecutor, last question, you condemned attacks on law enforcement officers, and you even issued a warning in your district saying, "Let it be known, if you lay a hand on an officer, the Southern District of Texas will do whatever it can to put you in federal prison," etc. So you are very much against attack on police officers. Did the rioters on January 6th attack law enforcement officers?
Senator,
No?
I'm sorry?
Yes or no?
Senator, my understanding from news reports is that there was some.
I'm sorry, what?
My understanding
Did
from,
they attack law enforcement officers or not on January 6th?
Senator, my understanding from news reporting is that yes.
And so you also said that people who attack law enforcement officers are attacking the American system of justice. So would you say that the rioters on January 6th, who, by the way, all pardoned by President Trump, were they attacking the American way of justice?
Senator, I can't offer my
Yes or
opinion
no?
as to a matter of public controversy.
Well, I would say that since you say that people who attack police officers are attacking the American system of justice, I would say that January 6th rioters fit that profile or mode. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
One from a criminal defense attorney, one from a public defender, and one from a civil rights attorney. Each represented criminal defendants in cases before Mr. Ganji. All three letters praise his competence, ethics, and professionalism as a federal prosecutor. One of the letters described the nominee as, quote, "the human being that we should all strive to become, and the attorney most who practice hope to be," end of quote. All these records have similar sentiments. Without objection, these three records will be placed in the report. Senator Kennedy, and then for who's ever on the Republican side, I've got to go up to finance and I'll be back, so just take your turn, and I think I'll be back before the meeting's over.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Ganji, how long did you work for Senator Cruz?
Senator, I worked for Senator Cruz for 3 years.
Okay. Did you work closely with him?
I would say so, Senator, yes.
Okay. Is it true that Senator Cruz can burp the alphabet backwards?
Senator, I've been instructed not to reveal that.
Is it true that growing up, Senator Cruz had an imaginary friend who his parents actually preferred?
Senator, I have no such knowledge.
Okay. What article of the Constitution calls for checks and balances?
Senator, I think checks and balances is inherent in the first three articles of the Constitution, which gives to all of them different powers and responsibilities.
Okay. Mr. Peterson, welcome. Tell me how you amend the U.S. Constitution.
Senator, you amend the U.S. Constitution pursuant to the procedure found in Article 5.
Could you speak into that mic, please, sir?
Sorry, Senator. The Constitution is amended pursuant to the procedure in Article 5, and that is a two-thirds vote of both the House and the Senate, and then ratification by 3/4 of the states. There's also a constitutional convention method, but that's never been used.
Okay. Mr. Fowles, how are you?
I'm doing well.
What's the warrant requirement?
The warrant requirement states that any person who is going to be arrested should have a warrant. The police should seek a warrant for that person to arrest them. There are exceptions to the warrant requirement, including exigent circumstances, which are usually followed up in Arkansas with a probable cause complaint and an affidavit and warrant in support of that.
What about to search someone? Do you have to have a warrant?
Yes,
Let me amend that. Does the warrant requirement apply to search and seizure?
Yes, according to the Fourth Amendment to the United States Constitution, there shall be no unreasonable searches and seizures without a warrant. There are obviously exceptions to that as well, including the Carroll-Ross doctrine for movable objects, exigent circumstances when time simply doesn't permit to be able to seek a warrant from a magistrate or a judge. But yes.
Could Arkansas decide that it doesn't want to follow the federal rule, that it wants to require a warrant for all arrests and all searches and seizures with no exceptions?
They certainly could, Senator. However, as a prosecutor for many years, I understand that those exemptions to the warrant requirement are important for public safety and for law enforcement safety.
How could Arkansas do that?
Arkansas could pass a law with the state legislature to say that a warrant is required for every arrest that's made throughout the state of Arkansas. And obviously, that would be subject to challenges in both state and federal court.
And if Arkansas did that, why doesn't the supremacy clause overrule Arkansas?
It certainly would be an argument if that was challenged in federal court.
Well, who would win?
I'm not sure, without knowing more facts about how the statute was drafted and being able to examine exactly, the type of legislative interpretation that goes along with that. So without more facts,
well, let me give you these facts. You recited correctly the warrant requirement and the exceptions both for arrest and search and seizure. Suppose the Arkansas legislature said, we appreciate the advice, but we're not going to follow it. We're going to require a warrant for both arrests and for searches and seizures, okay? And somebody challenged that under the supremacy clause. Who would win?
I'm not sure that I've ever thought about that in depth, Senator, but I think it would be a strong challenge to that state law, and I think it would be
What if Arkansas construed its state constitution to require a warrant for both arrest and search and seizure?
I think it would be the same analysis, whether it was a law that was passed by the state legislature or an amendment to the Constitution.
Why couldn't Arkansas? Have you ever heard of the adequate and independent state ground doctrine?
Yes, Senator.
Why wouldn't the adequate and independent state ground doctrine apply there?
That certainly would be an argument that one of the parties could make in support of that Arkansas state law. And again, I think it would go back to legislative analysis and determining all the factors that go into that as to whether that law would withstand the scrutiny from the court.
Okay, thank you, councilors. Senator Whitehouse.
Thank you, Chairman. Welcome.
I'm sorry, what did you call me?
Chairman.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, you're the acting chair, aren't you? You got the gavel. You all, if you are confirmed, will become members of the federal judiciary. You all will become members of the federal judiciary at a time when there is a particularly difficult threat environment for judges. A person threatening a judge has committed a crime, correct?
Yes, Senator.
Yes, Senator.
Yes, Senator.
And the criminal liability related to that threat could extend beyond the utterer of the threat. Is that also correct?
I think that would depend strongly on the facts and circumstances, the nature of the
Absolutely.
threat.
But there are facts and circumstances in which criminal liability for threatening a judge could extend beyond the utterer of the threat to individuals who may have orchestrated or in other ways directed that the threat be uttered against the judge. Is that, all three of you agree with that?
And I think my answer to that would be that it just depends strongly on the facts and
Very much.
circumstances
But
of
legally,
that situation.
it's a very open route that could happen if the facts and circumstances are there, correct?
Yes, Senator.
I would agree with my colleague, Senator.
I agree with my colleagues.
And let's say that you are now a judge and you are on the receiving end of that threat. Would you expect that the Marshal Service, or if the Marshal Service has handed the investigative piece of this over to the FBI would take a look at not only the utterer of the threat, but also evidence that there may be other parties complicit or culpable behind the utterer of the threat?
And Senator, there's been some very recent case law on the analysis of threats, both against individuals and against federal officials. And I would hope that the investigating officers and the investigating AUSAs would look closely at those factors and would look at also the facts and circumstances of the individual involved and the circumstances surrounding that. And so I think my answer to that is I would hope that the U.S. Marshals, the Federal Protection Service, and the AUSAs who are assigned to that case would look closely at all of those factors and make an appropriate determination.
Do you all agree that it would be wrong to categorically refuse to investigate behind the utterer, no matter what the evidence?
I think I'd revert back to my original answer that it just depends very strongly on the facts and circumstances of the threat and whether it's analyzed as a true threat or whether other individuals are involved in making that threat as well.
Which means that if there were such facts and circumstances, it would be wrong for federal investigators as a categorical matter to refuse to investigate that. There is a possible avenue of investigation, and to foreclose that would not be right. Do I understand that correctly?
I think so, Senator. My original answer remains the same, that I would hope they analyzed all the facts.
But depending on the facts and circumstances, it would be wrong to foreclose investigating that at all as a categorical matter. Do you agree as well, Mr.?
Senator, I agree with my colleague. I think it's a highly factual circumstance, and I don't think I can offer an opinion as to the scenario presented.
Except that, you know, every criminal investigation ends up being a highly factual circumstance, and if there is an avenue of investigation and of criminal liability, that should be investigated where the facts and circumstances justify. It's a fairly straightforward proposition. You're not contesting that, are you?
Senator, my understanding of your question, whether every avenue of investigation should be pursued, I think that's highly dependent on the specific case. Maybe an avenue of investigation is...
Are there some cases in which an avenue of investigation that's supported by the evidence should not be pursued?
Well, Senator, I think the supported by the evidence part of it is the key, and I think that...
That's why my question was asked the way it was, which is, why would you want an investigative agency to categorically refuse to investigate legitimate avenues of investigation if the evidence, if the facts and circumstances justify it? You're not suggesting that that's a good idea, are you?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand your question, Senator.
Never mind. My time has expired.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator. Senator Moody.
Thank you, Chairman Kennedy.
I love the sound of that, Chairman.
And thank you to our nominees.
Gives me goosebumps.
Thank you to our nominees. Thank you to your families for being here today. This is certainly a big day for your loved ones, but you as well. Anytime someone in your family commits to public service, that demands the entire family's attention and often support. Certainly as someone who grew up in a family of public service and now in one myself, we are thankful to you for being here and supporting these folks. And I was so struck by our nominees. They all share one thing in common. At one point, either now or in the past, they were all prosecutors, working to ensure that the laws passed by lawmakers on behalf of the people's laws, were faithfully enforced. And that is so important to our carefully balanced separation of powers, the way our government is meant to work. So thank you for your prior service. I think it speaks volumes in who you are as people and your commitment to ensuring not only the strength of our constitutional framework, but the strength and safety of our communities. And I, for one, am comforted by that we have nominees of your caliber being put up for these positions. I want to ask you about the phenomenon that we have been seeing around the nation where prosecutors of jurisdictions are saying, I don't care what the people's law says. I don't like the law, and I don't think it should be a law, and therefore I'm not going to prosecute it. What is your opinion, Mr. Ganji, on what that does to the constitutional framework and how the people's government is supposed to work?
Senator, I don't want to speak about the specific instance you described or a matter of public controversy, but I could say that as a government official, an unelected mid-level executive branch official, it's not up to me to decide what laws are, should be prosecuted or not be prosecuted. I think the policy decisions are best left to the branches accountable to the people.
And just in general, not specifically, Mr. Folks, how important it is, do we have top prosecutors of jurisdictions enforcing the people's laws?
I think that that's very important. Obviously, we've all taken an oath to enforce the law as they are written, and I'm very proud of our record in Western Arkansas with our case intake and with the prosecution of a variety of criminal offenses in Western Arkansas. But I also share what Mr. Ganji, my colleague, noted, that I can't speak specifically to any particular
I'm not asking
prosecutors.
you to speak specifically, but the phenomenon
in
of having top prosecutors or top law enforcement officials say, personally, I'm not going to do what the people want me to do because I don't agree with it. That fundamentally disrupts our system of government. Would you agree?
I agree, and I think back to some of the jury trials that I've handled and what we've asked jurors to do, which is even if you don't agree with the law or you don't believe it should be a law, can you faithfully apply that to the facts and circumstances of each individual case? And I think if we ask jurors to do that, it's perfectly acceptable to expect prosecutors and elected.
And so let me stop you there and talk about the judicial branch. I was a former judge. I come from a long line of judges. I've been a prosecutor like yourselves.
Yes, sir.
A lawyer. And I'm really concerned right now that the judicial branch has a PR crisis, a rightfully labeled probably PR crisis, and because we have many district court judges around the nation that are more interested in wearing a blue jersey than a black robe. And I am, based on my fundamental belief, we have to have impartial judges that will faithfully apply the laws that are given to them. I believe this, just as the former situation I described, fundamentally disrupts the carefully balanced power as set forth in our Constitution. Would you agree, Mr. Folks?
I do agree, and I think it's...
Mr. Ganji?
I do, Senator.
Would you agree, Mr. Peterson?
Yes, Senator.
And specifically, when you have district court judges running around to conferences suggesting, with no evidence or any circumstances to support it, that this administration or this president is going to violate court orders, or you have district court judges with no evidence at all making decisions that senators even would destroy evidence, all of this undermines that fair and impartiality need that we have to have, our public has to have in our judges. And I am terrified that some of the behavior that we have seen around the country is undermining the strength of our system. And I want to ask you, Mr. Ganji, part of this is when judges issue nationwide injunctions. What is your belief in terms of a ceiling of relief that is available to a district court judge?
Senator, I know the Supreme Court has spoken on this recently in the CASA case, that the relief should be one that would give the parties before full relief, but that Congress did not authorize otherwise nationwide injunctions for district courts.
And I see that my time has expired. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for being here, and thank you for your willingness to serve. Mr. Ganji, you have been a prosecutor, and you've repeatedly claimed that attacks on law enforcement are unacceptable, which I think we all can agree. You've also said that people who engage in attacks on law enforcement should be held accountable. You stated in a Department of Justice press release just last month, quote, "Those who attack law enforcement officers are attacking the American system of justice." In another release, you said, quote, "Let it be known if you lay a hand on an officer, deputy, or federal agent, SDTX will do whatever it can to put you in federal prison for as long as the law will allow. You've been warned." President Trump gave a blanket pardon to individuals who participated in the January 6th, 2021 attack on the Capitol. Many of them were involved in assaults on law enforcement. I know that you've been asked briefly about this issue during your appearance here today, but let me just take a couple of examples. Julian Gator sprayed U.S. Capitol Police Officer Brian Sicknick with pepper spray. Officer Sicknick died the next day. Gator admitted to this violence. He pleaded guilty to assaulting officers with a deadly weapon. He was sentenced to more than 6.5 years in prison for his crimes against law enforcement officers before he was pardoned by President Trump. So my question to you is, do you support President Trump's pardon of Mr. Gator?
Senator, I can't comment on the executive and the president's exercise of his enumerated constitutional powers or comment at all on a coordinate branch's use of its enumerated constitutional powers any more than I could comment on the House's use of the power of the purse. I am comfortable saying I abhor political violence of all kinds.
Well, this individual atrociously assaulted a Capitol police officer, and you're unwilling to say whether you support a pardon that allowed him to go free without any record of a crime?
Senator, as a judicial nominee, it would be improper for me to wade into a public conflict like that and comment on the president's use of his pardon power or President Biden's commutation of people on death row. Those are issues that I think are improper for a judicial candidate to comment.
I'm talking about violent assault on a police officer. Ryan Nichols, for example. Ryan Nichols also pled guilty to assaulting law enforcement officers. He pushed the crowd against officers who were defending the door at the Capitol. And after the attack, he posted a video to Facebook where he said, quote, "I'm going to be violent now." And he said, quote, "If you want to know where Ryan Nichols stands for violence." He was sentenced to more than 5 years in prison. President Trump pardoned him. What do you think is the reason that would justify that pardon?
Senator, I wouldn't stand to speculate on the president's reasoning.
Well, do you support it?
Senator, again, I can't comment on separate branches' exercise of its enumerated constitutional powers.
Are there any limits to what you would not support in terms of the pardon used by the president?
Senator, you stated any limits to what I would support. I'm stating that I cannot comment on President Trump's use of the pardon power or President Biden's use of his power of commutation for people on death row.
Well, I haven't asked you about President Biden's use of the pardon power. And for you to gratuitously talk about other uses of the pardons, I think is simply meant to distract from this use of the pardon power with respect to these individuals who committed assaults, brutal assaults on police officers. My time has expired. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Before I call on Senator Hawley, I have a letter here supporting Mr. Ganji's nomination from a person, Ray Hunt, Executive Director of the Houston Police Officers Union. Mr. Hunt praised Mr. Ganji, quote, steadfast commitment to keeping our city safe, end quote, and his efforts to, quote, work hand in hand with local law enforcement to combat violent crime, reduce the flow of illegal firearms and narcotics, and hold dangerous offenders accountable, end of quote, without objection. That'll go on the record. Senator Hawley.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Ganji, I'll give you just some more time if you wanted to respond. Did you want to say something about President Biden's use of the commutation power?
Senator, I was merely illustrating instances where the president exercises broad, unreviewable pardon power and commutation power. And I understand that President Joe Biden commuted the sentences of many people on federal death row.
Violent offenders, I think, weren't they?
That is correct, my understanding.
Do you want to give him a grade on that?
Senator, I wouldn't offer a grade on that.
Do you want to grade any president on their use of the constitutional authority?
No, Senator, I would not.
Is that within your purview? Would it be within your purview should you be confirmed?
Senator, neither whether I should be confirmed or as a nominee, would it be proper for me to comment on that use?
Let me ask each of you, if I could. I want to talk a little bit first about nationwide injunctions. I think Senator Moody was starting to ask you just a moment ago. I think this is a vital issue. Tell me what you understand the scope of, if you were to be confirmed, tell me what you understand the scope of your equitable powers to be to grant injunctive relief. To whom could you grant it, under what circumstances? I think this is an issue of vital importance. It's been something that has been discussed on a bipartisan basis here. So let me start with you, Mr. Fowkes. Am I pronouncing your name correctly?
Folks, just like a bunch of folks. Yes, sir.
Okay, very good. Mr. Fowkes, and then we'll go down the dais. Go ahead.
As I understand it, the issue of injunctions and temporary restraining orders are controlled by the provisions of Federal Rule of Civil Procedure 65, and pursuant to that rule and the cases that have been interpreted that rule, there's a series of factors that courts have typically considered in whether or not a temporary restraining order or an injunction is appropriate. And those begin with the likelihood of whether or not one of the parties, the moving party, will succeed at trial, the irreparable harm that may be possible if the order is not granted, the possibility of a public interest in that order, and several other factors.
All of that sounds correct. Can you, is it your understanding, can you bind parties, should you be confirmed, could you as a district court judge, could you bind parties who are not before you?
It is a very developing area of the law, and that my understanding is that power would be limited by the case law from the Supreme Court and also by the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure.
Well, tell me what you think the relevant case law from the court is. I assume you're talking about the CASA case, but
yes, Senator.
Tell me about it.
In the CASA case, the court determined that that was a power that should be reserved to the Congress for a nationwide, authority over certain issues. And I think that it has modified our previous understanding of Federal Rule Civil Procedure 65. And I think, again, it's a very developing area of the law, and it would be very fact determinative and very fact specific. But I think that going forward, it is an important case for every district court judge to keep in mind.
Well, do you think that there are some instances in which, are you telling me you think you can as a district court judge, there are some instances as a district court judge where you could bind parties who are not before you?
I think we're still understanding the court's ruling in CASA, and we're still kind of developing procedures that go along with that. And so it would be highly unusual and certainly challengeable in court.
Well, what's the basic rule that you understand the Supreme Court to have laid down on the CASA case? Let me ask it that way.
The basic rule is that a nationwide injunction that enjoins people who aren't before the court would be exceeding the court's power in that respect.
Okay, good. Mr. Ganji, do you want to weigh in on this? How do you understand, what would your power be as a district court judge to bind parties not in front of you?
Senator, generally, I would not be able to bind parties not in front of the court. But the goal for that, any injunction would be to give complete relief to the parties before the court.
Okay, which I think is the rule. I think you just stated the rule of the Casa case, correct?
Senator, yes.
So in other words, the district courts, this is, Senator Kennedy, here I am, I'm asking the questions and giving the answers. I'm kind of, yeah, thanks. It's really, I think, kind of defeating the point, though. It's like your bar exam, except for I'm giving the answers. I think the Casa case said that the equitable relief, the equitable powers of the district court are limited to providing full relief to a plaintiff who is in front of the court properly, but nothing exceeding that. Is that your understanding, Mr. Ganji? Have I got that correct?
Yes, Senator.
Okay. So let's just talk about what that means in practice. I'll come to you for that, Mr. Peterson. What does that mean in practice in terms of the district court's equitable powers?
Well, Senator, it means that the court has authority over the parties that are before it in the case. The Supreme Court in Trump v. Casa pointing out that nationwide injunctions don't flow from the Judiciary Act. They're, the goal is to give complete relief to the parties before the court. And if I'm fortunate enough to be confirmed, I would strive to achieve that.
And, is it fair to say that because the injunctive power is itself equitable, and our courts have said for centuries now that equity power is something that's got to be very, very closely monitored? I mean, because it's discretionary in many ways. It's difficult to pin down. It can be used, it can be broadened out and used for many, many purposes. You've got to be very careful in the use of equitable powers. It's safe to say that you would want to be very, very careful about any kind of a ruling that reaches out beyond plaintiffs in front of you. Even if it's necessary to make the plaintiffs in front of you whole, you want to be very careful about binding parties in any way who are not in front of the court.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right, I've got some more questions for each of you as it relates to sentencing, the purposes of sentencing, the sentencing guidelines, which I think are very important. My time's expired, so I'll give those to you in the written record. Congratulations again on your nominations.
By the way, I have legislation in. I presume I got several co-sponsors on national injunctions, and I was with the chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, and he also has legislation in on that. So regardless of what the Supreme Court said, I think there's ways we can narrow it down even more.
I agree with you, Mr. Chairman. I think it's important we do it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. Senator Schiff is on his way. Senator Kennedy, did you have any other questions you want to ask or anything?
No, I'm happy.
Okay. I'm going to ask you folks, out of courtesy to Senator Schiff, I should just hold in abeyance the continuation. I don't have any more questions, but
well, Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to ask another question if you.
Please go ahead.
I'm sure the nominees are ecstatic about that. Let me just, while we're on this topic, I want to stay on the topic of nationwide injunctions for just a second. Let me just ask you this. If a district court were to recharacterize the injunction and say, well, it's not an injunction per se, it's a temporary restraining order, and therefore the Casa case doesn't really apply, therefore, it's a whole different set of analysis. Is it your understanding that you could do that? In other words, is the temporary restraining order a get-out-of-jail-free card? Is that a completely different set of circumstances, a completely different set of analyses? What's your understanding of how you can use TROs and how the Casa case relates to TROs? Let's start again with you, Mr. Forbes.
No, I believe it's the same analysis and the same factors. The one that I was just about to get to before is the balance of equities. And I think that's where the Casa decision makes a direct impact on the factors for both a temporary restraining order and for a nationwide injunction.
Senator, I think the analysis would be the same. They're both equitable remedies.
It's the same analysis, Senator.
Okay. Senator Schiff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If you could give me one more moment.
Yeah. We won't take it off your 5 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Ganji, you worked for Professor and former Deputy Assistant Attorney General John Yoo. And I wanted to ask you, he recently wrote an op-ed in the Washington Post concerning the military strikes on shipping and raised an issue as to whether that was lawful. And let me ask you your thoughts as a legal and a constitutional matter. In the absence of congressional authorization to use force, in the absence of any declaration of war, are military attacks on ships suspected of drug trafficking lawful or constitutional?
Senator, I think that's a highly fact-specific situation, and if there were such strikes and there were going to be challenged in court, there is a likelihood that it could come before me if I'm fortunate enough to be confirmed, so I don't think I can offer an opinion on that.
Well, can you offer an opinion on whether you believe that the War Powers Act is constitutional?
Senator, again, that might be something that comes before me as well.
I would imagine any number of legal issues could come before you. That doesn't preclude you from expressing your legal views on the subject, particularly something as broad as the constitutionality of legislation like the War Powers Act.
Senator, my answer is the same.
And let me ask you all, share with me, if you would, your views on nationwide injunctions. And we can go down the line.
I think it's a very developing area of the law after Trump versus CASA and that decision. But typically, injunctions and temporary restraining orders are constrained by Federal Rule of Civil Procedure 65. And the courts have, along with that rule, basically considered 4 important factors as to whether or not an injunction or a temporary restraining order should be issued, which I've already stated. But one of them is the likelihood of a party being successful on that injunction in trial eventually, the balance of equities between issuing the injunction and not, the possibility of irreparable harm, and then, of course, the public interest in issuing that injunction. With it being a developing area of the law, it would be a very cautious analysis, but it would include those factors and the factors enumerated by the court in Trump versus CASA.
So you wouldn't categorically rule out the potential applicability of a nationwide injunction?
I think that we have to examine closely CASA, and the key would be the balance of equities and whether or not that Supreme Court decision constrains the application of those 4 factors with a nationwide injunction, and it would appear on its face that it would. And I think with it being a very developing area of the law, it's going to be a fact-specific and case-specific analysis that goes into those factors.
Care to respond?
Senator, I agree with much of my colleagues' statement. I would say post-CASA, you would look to see what is needed to give the parties before you full and equitable relief. But generally, the Supreme Court has cautioned against courts having the ability to bind parties not before it.
And I agree with both of my colleagues, Senator.
If we could go down the line also, do you believe that the Congress has the power to legislate an enforceable code of ethics on the Supreme Court?
I think I would probably need more facts and circumstances to be able to answer that question fully, but certainly if Congress were to pass a law, it would be subject to all the same scrutiny requirements from any other piece of legislation.
Well, can you do a little better than that?
I think that Congress certainly has the authority under the law to issue laws and to vote on laws and to pass statutes, and certainly that would be one that Congress has the authority to do. Whether it would withstand constitutional scrutiny, I would have to have more facts and circumstances to be able to make a complete analysis of that subject.
Senator, I also would like to have more facts before rendering an opinion on that. But I would obviously be very attuned to the separation of powers concerns that something like that would raise.
Senator, again, I agree with my colleagues. I was only going to add the potential separation of powers concern, but Mr. Ganji did that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
be the last one. He had to go to another committee meeting, that's why he wasn't here. So just hold, please. Are you ready to go if I call on you now? We're waiting for Senator Durbin, but you can go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And as always, congratulations to you all on the nominations. We are working as hard as we can, and I know you've heard it from others, to make certain that we get through the nominations and confirmation process and to fill positions with people that believe in the Constitution and the rule of law and will conduct themselves accordingly. Mr. Ganji, am I saying that correct?
Yes, Senator, thank you.
Okay, just want to be sure there. I noted that you had served as both an acting and an interim U.S. Attorney in Texas. And looking at your materials, I was impressed by your aggressiveness and noted that you had filed 225 cases in a single week. A lot of those were narcotics offenses, violent crimes, immigration matters, and your career has included successful prosecutions. And I noted that you had taken on some complex cases dealing with human trafficking, child abuse, crimes against children. So talk about this experience as a prosecutor and how you would translate that experience.
Senator, I first speak to my experience as a prosecutor. You know, the one thing that I learned was how interconnected so many of these different offenses are. Having a secure border where we know where people are coming in is essential to preventing the trafficking of children or the human trafficking. You know, it is something that as the numbers come down, you see less and less of it, and that's a very good thing. As a judge, I understand how sensitive those cases are and how they be approached with great caution. We're fortunate in the Southern District to have phenomenal prosecutors that handle those cases. They're very dedicated. They handle them with great care, with great compassion. And so I think that if I were selected as a judge, I would bring that experience with me, understanding that there's a tremendous human cost. There's certain crimes that maybe don't have an immediate apparent victim, such as, say, narcotics trafficking. There isn't a person you can name, but with sex crimes, crimes against children, there is a very tangible victim there. And so justice for victims is very important.
Thank you. Mr. Folks, I want to come to you in the same vein, because here at this committee, we've put a lot of work into fighting CSAM, my Report Act, which requires big tech platforms to report to NCMEC when they have actions against the safety of children. And then we're trying to establish a national human trafficking database. It is Senator Klobuchar and I completely bipartisan, but we think DOJ needs to have that. And there is a lot of work we've done in protecting children in the digital space. Senator Blumenthal and I have the Kids Online Safety Act that went through the Senate. We're trying to get it signed into law. And I know that you have prioritized the prosecution of some of these CSAM and child abuse cases. So talk about what you have done and how that would influence your work going forward.
Under my leadership at the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Western District of Arkansas, we have prosecuted child abuse cases and exploitation cases at over 3 times the national average, according to the Sentencing Commission and their statistics that they gathered over the last 5 years. We're very, very proud of our work there, and the work is so important because these are the most vulnerable members of our society. And when we take an oath to uphold the law and to seek to enforce the law, there's no greater opportunity to make our communities better and to safer than to prosecute those who would knowingly take advantage of children and exploit them in the ways that you've described. It's such important work. Going forward, obviously, it would be so important for a judge to consider all the appropriate sentencing factors which are taken into account, but those would be among the most important cases that any judge would review because the victims, again, are so vulnerable and such important members of our society.
Well, we appreciate the work that you all have done. I was talking with your governor this morning.
Yes.
And we were discussing the work that Arkansas has done to make certain, and the work she's led,
Yes.
To make certain that we protect our children in that virtual space, because most children today, if they encounter a drug dealer, a sex trafficker, a predator, a pedophile, a groomer, it happens first. That connection is first made in the digital space. So thank you for that work. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I'm sorry I had to step out, but I'll certainly be briefed by my staff as to the issues that you've discussed. Mr. Ganji, as U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of Texas, you have repeatedly criticized defendants who assaulted law enforcement officers. For example, you stated on multiple occasions that you employ a, quote, zero-tolerance policy against these offenders, and you argued that individuals who attack law enforcement are, quote, attacking the American system of justice. Do you stand by your comments criticizing individuals who violently assault law enforcement?
Yes, Senator, I do.
Do you believe that the January 6 offenders who were convicted of assaults on law enforcement attacked the American system of justice?
Senator, I think that calls for me
is
to
your
make
microphone on?
Yes, it is. I'm sorry, I'll move closer. Senator, I think that question asks for me to wade into like a matter of public controversy and a political issue, and therefore I cannot offer.
Too hot to handle, huh?
I'm sorry?
Too hot to handle.
No, Senator, I think just as a judicial nominee, it would be imprudent, and I think the canons of judicial conduct would prohibit me from weighing in on political matters such as that and matters of public controversy such as that.
Mr. Falks, the most important criminal justice reform legislation in a generation was the First Step Act of 2018. I was proud to lead this and follow the real leader, Chairman Grassley. It was signed into law by President Trump during his first administration. First Step Act represented a bipartisan recognition that we can and must do better when it comes to our criminal justice system in order to make our communities safer for all Americans. We've made great strides in bolstering public safety through the mechanisms of the First Step Act. What are your thoughts on the First Step Act as a federal prosecutor, and what steps will you take as a judge if you're confirmed to ensure that you encourage rehabilitation whenever possible?
I think it's an important piece of legislation, as you stated, Ranking Member Durbin, and I appreciate the question. I think that the First Step Act takes into account certain factors that are so important to the justice system. And some of those factors are obviously located already in 18 U.S.C. 3553A, the history and characteristics of the defendant, their past conduct, the nature and circumstances of the offense. But I think it also takes into account the notion of rehabilitation. And in Western Arkansas, we have something called the Focus Court, which our office has worked closely with our judges in Western Arkansas to attempt to rehabilitate those individuals who've been convicted of nonviolent drug offenses and other nonviolent offenses, and to prepare them to reenter society and to be valuable members of society. And so I think the First Step Act is an important part of that, signaling the importance of rehabilitation of some of the criminals in our justice system.
On another issue, related issue, the question of court orders. There seems to be some doubt and some questions have been raised as to whether or not the Trump administration follows the orders of a court in a prompt fashion and in a complete fashion. What will you consider to be the status of a court order if you issue a final order on the bench?
that any order that's issued by a federal district court carries with it great weight, and it carries with it an analysis of the statute, an analysis of the factors before the court, and I think that it should be given great weight and great deference. With regard to speaking on current public controversies, I'm simply constrained by the judicial canons, especially Canon 5, which prohibits, political speech and political conduct. But I would say my answer to your question is that the rulings of the court are inherently important to our justice system.
Mr. Ganji, ruling by the court on the executive branch members, is it required to be followed?
Senator, if I'm fortunate enough to be confirmed as a judge, any order that I enter, I would expect the parties, regardless of who they are, to follow them.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes, Senator, if I'm fortunate enough to be confirmed, I would expect that any order that I enter would be followed by the parties.
Thank you all very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. We're going to close now. Thanks all the nominees for your testimony. Written questions for the record may be submitted until November 26th at 5 p.m. We'd ask you to return them as quickly as you can.